The buzzer sounded, and he walked off the floor without shaking a single hand of the team that had just beaten him. The New York Knicks had just won their first championship in 53 years, a historic night. And yet the moment that set the internet on fire wasn't the trophy lift. It was a 22-year-old on the losing side. This is that story. First, the result, and only the result. New York beat the San Antonio Spurs 94-90 in Game 5, closing the series for games to 1. It's the Knicks' first title since 1973, ending a 53-year wait. Jalen Brunson was named Finals MVP after a 45-point night. That's the box score, and that's all we'll say about the basketball itself. Because the story of this night isn't who won, it's who everyone was talking about. And it wasn't the champions, it was the player they beat. The instant the buzzer went, Victor Wembanyama and several Spurs teammates left the court and headed straight for the locker room, without shaking hands with the newly crowned Knicks. The clip spread within minutes, and the reaction split almost instantly. One side called it disrespectful. The other argued it was the raw emotion of a player who had just had a title pulled out of his hands. And some pointed back to earlier in the season, noting he'd done something similar after losing the NBA Cup final, framing this not as a one-off but as a pattern. It's worth slowing down here. The harshest label is one group's read, and there's a counter-read worth holding right next to it. This was the first finals Wembanyama had ever reached, and the snub came seconds after the loss. Whatever you make of the gesture, it also tells you how heavily this stage landed on him. The bigger the stakes feel, the harder the exit. What made the clip travel so far wasn't only the act, it was the contrast. The Knicks were already mid-celebration, finally exhaling after 53 years, while a few feet away the losing team walked off in silence. Two ends of the same night, in the same frame. That split screen is what people kept replaying, and it's a big part of why a single missing handshake ended up outrunning an entire championship in the conversation. And here's the twist: the player who skipped the handshake on the court looked like a completely different person a few minutes later, at the podium. The man who walked past the handshake line sat down for his press conference and showed another face entirely. Wembanyama called the defeat the biggest lesson of his life. He said he wasn't running from the pain, he was using it as fuel. He admitted he couldn't yet put into words exactly what that lesson was, only that he was learning more from this moment than at any point before it. Once that clip went around, the tone softened. Some of the same voices that had criticized the handshake now gave him the point. The gesture may have missed, but the mindset was real. And there's history that backs that red. He has been here before, not in the NBA, but on a global stage. After France lost the 2024 Paris Olympic final to the United States, he wept on the court, then almost immediately reframed it as a beginning rather than an ending. People who knew that pattern expected this loss to follow the same arc: pain first, fuel later. But not everyone was in a forgiving mood. On the other side of the conversation, a harder question was already taking shape. Game 5 also had a single officiating moment that managed to irritate fans on both sides. In the third quarter, as Brunson rose for a three-pointer, Wembanyama appeared to crowd his landing space, and no foul was called. The no call drew real anger online, with some fans calling it indefensible, and a few spinning it into outright conspiracy about the officiating in a tight game. For balance, the other reading is just as available. Plenty saw it as a normal contest on a jump shot, not a swallowed whistle. We're not here to rule on the call, only to show you where the argument landed. Still, the refereeing flare-up was a side dish. The debate likely to outlast this entire night was something bigger: whether Wembanyama had been crowned too early in the first place. Right after the final buzzer, one pointed critique started to circulate. NBA legend Isaiah Thomas reached for a Michael Jordan comparison, suggesting the league had moved too fast in handing the throne to a 22-year-old. The idea? Even Jordan didn't win straight away. He lost, and lost again, before he ever reached the summit. Look at the numbers, and the critique has context, though maybe not the conclusion it points to. This was Wembanyama's very first NBA postseason. In that first run, he went straight to the finals and came within 3 wins of a championship. Even in the closeout Game 5, he still put up 19 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Calling that a failure, for a third-year player in his first-ever playoffs, sets the bar somewhere close to impossible. So this was never really a debate about whether he's good, it's a debate about expectations, about how high the world set them, and how fast. Think about what was actually being asked of him: to walk into his first postseason and immediately end a championship drought for a franchise that hadn't won in over a decade, against a roster of veterans who'd spent years learning how to close. Framed that way, he fell short starts to sound less like a verdict and more like a measure of how absurd the expectations had become. And nobody set those expectations on a different scale than his home country. While American outlets framed the night as the Knicks' triumph and Wembanyama's failure, France and much of Europe watched it through a different lens. To France, Wembanyama isn't just an NBA player, he's a generational symbol the country produced. After the 2024 Paris Olympic final, he cried following the loss to the United States and still posted a message thanking the country. Merci la France. France's prime minister at the time publicly sent words of encouragement. That's the scale of what he means there. So the French and European reaction leaned on a different word. Not failure, process. A 22-year-old reaching his first finals and pushing it to the edge of a title didn't read as a collapse outside the United States. It read as a trailer for what's coming. Same night, same game, and the view split clean across the Atlantic. That gap matters more than it looks. In the American conversation, a finals loss is close to the end of the story. You either lift the trophy or you don't. In the conversation back in France, the same result was closer to a checkpoint, one more rung on a climb everyone there assumes is still going up. Neither read is wrong, they're just measuring the same night against completely different clocks, and that's exactly why the global reaction to this loss looked nothing like the American one. And to be fair to San Antonio, this was a punishing night for the Spurs as a team, not just their star. Rookie Dylan Harper fought hard for 25 points but missed crucial layups down the stretch, and the rest of the team's young core couldn't find their shots when it mattered most. A group many had already labeled a future dynasty came up exactly one step short, and that gap, not just Wembanyama's exit, is what San Antonio will sit with all summer. Which leaves us with one question. Is a 22-year-old's first heartbreak the sign of a bubble bursting, or the opening page of a dynasty? The player who refused a handshake on the court, and the one who called this the biggest lesson of his life at the podium. Only next season will tell us which version points to what comes next. One thing is certain, on the night New York ended a 53-year wait, people are remembering it not for the champions, but for a single player who lost. And that alone tells you something about the weight Victor Wembanyama already carries. So what did you see tonight? A bubble, or a beginning? Tell me below.